Hello, and welcome to our contemplation on the Libra season 2023. So, this contemplation is going to be a look ahead at Libra season. I've put in the chat and in the description some notable aspects. We'll have a Aries full moon. We'll have our first solar eclipse not our first solar eclipse of the year, but our first eclipse of eclipse season. We'll also have, every single planet that's about to go through Aries, which includes the Sun and Mercury right away. And then Mars is there already, and Venus will be coming along here in a little while. So all of those planets moving through Libra are also going to be conjuncting the South Node. And at that time, will also be opposing the North Node. So that will be spurring that journey on. Basically, all of that to say, it is a super active, and I do kind of also mean super active, Libra season. And there are so many different pieces that I want to bring in here, and I'm going to do the Venus thing. The ruler of Libra is Venus, and Venus rules our values. It also rules our own equilibrium. So Libra is like a lot about balance, and with Venus, it's like, how do we balance inside of ourselves? And for me personally, a deep breath usually does the trick. And a sip of water. And just take a moment and come back into balance with ourselves. And which piece would like to come forward first? They're currently bickering amongst themselves. No, I want to be first. No, I want to be first. You're precious. You're so precious. I'm so excited to get to share. I have time to kind of like let this be whatever it wants to be as far as what all wants to come out. But I think the first thing we have to lay down in the foundation when we talk about Libra energy is that Libra represents the other. So Libra is part of the axis Aries and Libra, Aries being the self and Libra being the other. So Libra, Venus rule Libra, is often about relationships and relationship dynamics. And that is the first piece that I want to lay down, is like, what is a relationship? What does it mean? What is it for? And also just kind of a disclaimer that'll apply to all of the rest of what I'm going to talk about is like, these are my beliefs. This is just how I see things. Like, this is not meant to be universal truth. So please take all of it with a grain of salt and just use it for info for your own contemplation and seeing what you think about these things. But when I think about relationship, I see it as a tool. I see it as a tool for becoming more of who we were born to be. And that applies to friendships, that applies to romantic relationships, it applies to business partnerships, work partnerships, like any kind of person that you are partnering with to advance both of you in a way where neither of you would have been able to get there on your own. Like, that's where there's like a synergy in relationship. Again, there's leverage. It's a tool. It's like a how to get further faster, like more people, bring in more people, because the more people you have, the more hands you have, the more passion you have. And as long as you have good leadership in the mixture of all of that, you have all of these people working towards one goal and pouring their life force into one specific direction. And again, that mission is going further faster than if just one person is working on it all by themselves. So relationship, partnership, it's leverage in this world. And the other thing that it is like, think here back to an age before mirrors, and definitely before like social media and cameras and like any of that. But like even before mirrors, when like just even being able to see what we personally look like we didn't know. we didn't know what we looked like. Like maybe we caught a glimpse of ourselves in like some moving water of like a pond or something. But like, dude, like other than that, like we don't know what we look like. We cannot see ourselves. Our eyeballs are pointed outward. So like we do not see ourselves. It is in the reflection of the other person that we get a more well-rounded, more robust sense of ourself. And that is the function of relationship. It's about doing things you can't do by yourself. Like having kids is a perfect example of like a lot of people, I think like way more people than would admit this, get married so that they can have kids. Like, and there's no shame in that. Like there's only the choices that you're making and how well they're working out for you. But there's a lot of people who partner with another person so that they can have the experience of being a parent. And that's just one example. Another example is the first time I opened a business, I brought the creative side, the project management side, the taking the vision and turning it into a reality, like actually going through the motions of that. I brought that, and somebody else brought like business background and the financial side and secured our funding and got all of that part established so that there was even a container for what I was doing as far as designing the interiors, spending the money to get the stuff that we needed. But it was very much a divide and conquer. Like I don't have the business background, nor do I want to focus on the finances. And this other person does not have the creative instincts, nor do they want to actually do the incremental steps of bringing it to life. So here are two people, each with a different skill set, bringing them together and pooling their resources such that then they're able to do something that they wouldn't have been able to do by themselves. So relationship is a powerful thing in this life. And who you choose to partner with says a lot about who you are and says a lot about what you desire most. And whether we like it or not, that I believe to be true. I believe that like you can tell a lot about a person by who they choose to be in relationship with and who they choose to not be in relationship with. The relationships they choose to stay in and the relationships they choose to end. It's one of the most interesting facets of our authenticity are those people we choose to be in relationship with, those people we are capable of harmonizing with. You know, like I'm having an experience right now where, and this is something that I predicted as far as like the Libra South Node, that like kind of karmic purge of the South Node going through Libra, it's going to be asking us a lot of deep, potentially really uncomfortable questions about our patterns in relationships and if we like what we're getting out of those relationships. And that potentially it will get too hard to harmonize with whoever it is that we're in relationship with. And that's what causes us to walk away is like, I can't do this. I can't in good conscience be a party to this. Like I don't believe in this. I don't support this. And there is, I think the shadow side of feeling that way is trying to get the other person to change, trying to get the other person to come into harmony with you then. Or harmonizing with them anyway and suffering in silence. So like all of that's kind of in that shadow, but really like the whole purpose of relationship in the first place is it's basically a mirror back before we had mirrors. It's like an old-fashioned mirror. So like you look in this reflection and you see like, I don't support this. I don't like this. I don't want this. The answer is not for them to be different. The answer is so if you don't want it, then do you want to continue to give your power to it, AKA your attention? Is that something that you want to do, giving your power to that connection, to the thing that you don't believe in? Do you want to still harmonize with it and hold yourself in that place by doing so? And that's always a question. It is a legitimate, genuine, open-ended question that, again, I think as we go through this South Node journey through Libra, it is going to get harder and harder and harder to stay in relationships that do not allow us to be our authentic self, that legitimately don't feel good to us. And when that happens, it's like, you know, the relationship between us and us. Like, how do we relate to ourselves when I don't like this? I don't want to be with this. I don't want to be here. I don't want to participate in this. I no longer wish to engage in this exchange. Like, what do you do with that? And again, I think there are some shadow sides to that where it can become, you know, we can fall back into maybe old safety seeking patterns where, again, we're harmonizing anyway. We just kind of keep our mouth shut, sort of thing, walk on eggshells and just, yeah, like avoid it, basically, like keep the peace, like that, the shadow of keeping the peace. Um, but it's also a reflection of like, the things that help us to understand ourselves the best are the things that are least like us. So, like, if somebody is the complete opposite of you, if they're like, I believe this, and you're like, wow, so I believe exactly the opposite of that. I believe exactly the opposite of that. And I believe exactly the opposite of that. Like, I think that when you meet someone where there is a lot of contrast and conflict between who you are and who they are, I think that is one of like life's greatest blessings as far as finding the edges and finding the edges of yourself, finding potentially new territory in who are you? Who am I? Right? Because I feel like when we agree with someone, like if it's real agreement, right? Like if we're not faking agreement, if we're not faking harmony, if we are really harmonizing with someone, if we are really like resonating with someone, like they are moving energy inside of us and it feels like really good. Um, Actually, I learned this morning, or I read a little quote this morning that said that basically that's a glimmer, and that a glimmer is the opposite of a trigger. Like a glimmer is when somebody does something or says something that like moves really good feeling energy inside of you, and obviously a trigger is when somebody says something or does something or you see something that moves energy inside of you and it feels like you're dying. Like it can feel really bad. Um, so like, but there's a good version and it's called a glimmer. So if you're glimmering over someone, that's revealing. That's like part of the same thing we're talking about is like that person is a mirror. And so if you're glimmering over them, this is also where it comes back though to how are you relating to it? Because again, the shadow of that is to give all the credit to the other person, to give all the like glimmeriness, the sparkle, it belongs to them and I'm witnessing it in them and it's really enjoyable. So now you need to stay so that I can keep seeing the shiny sparkly that you're bringing to the table. You're going to sit right here. So like we try to capture them so that we can hang on to it. But like, obviously that's not the light side. That's the possessive side of thinking that they're bringing something to you that is the glimmer when really they're reflecting something that lives inside of you all the time. They're just bringing it out of you in that moment and it feels really good. So the thing is, like the people that we feel really, really, really good around, it's worth asking the question, why? What is it about them that makes me feel so good in their presence? And let's say, for example, I was telling my friend Jody this yesterday. I'm like, the safety between us, I feel like I don't have hardly any inhibitions when it comes to her and telling her stuff. Like if something comes through me that like I want to tell this story or I want to say this thing or I want to share this with her, I don't think about it. I don't second guess. I just say whatever it is. And I was telling her that like I think that's because I feel so safe in this connection with you, is like I can say anything and I know you're not gonna yell at me, you're not gonna judge me, you're not gonna like criticize, like it's just not gonna be like that. I know that. I feel safe here to just kind of let it out, whatever it is. And it's like, okay, so if that's why I like being in her presence, then the task becomes like the reflection of that is cultivating greater inner safety inside of yourself such that you feel that level of openness between you and you, right? So like if someone, let's take a different example. If someone is complimentary of you, like they think you're funny, they think they're laughing at your jokes, they're smiling at your stories, they're flirting with you, even they think you're cute or sexy or whatever, they're flattering you in some way, and that feels good potentially, especially if it's genuine, if there's like real authentic like kind of passion behind it. It feels really good to receive that. So again, the shadow can be to claim them and keep them so that you can continue to get that from them. But it's like, okay, so then if that's a reflection, how could I personally be more complimentary of myself? How could I personally view myself with a little more sex appeal? How could I personally appreciate my own beauty a little bit more? How could I appreciate the humor inside of me a little bit more? Like whatever it is that they're appreciating, you can appreciate it and generate the same kind of feeling. So the thing is, though, we cannot accurately see ourselves. That is the point of the mirror. That is the point of the relationship. So when someone does glimmer us or they tickle us in some really delightful way, that can be its own wake-up call to kind of what you're craving between you and you. Like, what is the next level of expansion within that relationship? And same thing when somebody triggers us. When somebody, with Libra and Venus, we often talk about love, but I think hate is kind of the dark side of the moon. Like it's the same thing. So like bringing hate into this conversation, like if somebody's triggering you and you're disliking them strongly enough to consider it hating, it's like that is also a reflection. And what is it that is being craved in this relationship between you and you? Like if somebody is rejecting us or disliking us or whatever it is, like, I mean, in a nutshell, that is essentially some level of self-rejection that they are mirroring back to us, that they are reflecting back to us. Again, great time to insert that these are all just my own thoughts. These are all just my own theories, and everybody's free to do whatever they want. So yeah, like believe whatever you want. And I'm just letting you see through my window. I am reflecting back to you like this is my version of reality. And it will, I imagine, for every single person, in some places it glimmers and in some places it triggers. And kind of just that's life. But I do think that this Libra season, because the South Node is there, and we're going through this 18-month karmic purge through Libra and through our relationship dynamics, that this Libra season, the sun moving through Libra, it has the sun being kind of like the center of our identity and the life source of our solar system, right? Like just everything that we need comes from the sun. And so to have the sun coming across that South Node, I could see it being like a really productive time for the words that are coming are like spring cleaning in our social connections. Like what I mean by that is getting clear on the relationships that you're participating in that aren't truly a reflection of you. Like it doesn't actually feel good to be in that relationship. And at that point, like when people trigger us, it's healing. It's like the wound is where the light comes in, right? Like that old saying. But the reality of that is that that can be really painful to let go of people who have been in our lives, even for a little while. And that actually is a segue that I want to talk about in terms of Libra is an air sign. So again, I think it's fascinating that like this realm of relationships where we have fire, which is passion, we have water, which is our emotions. Like you would think that relationship was like somewhere in there, and it's not. It's like in this air sign of like balance and equality. Like what an interesting energy to like rule over relationship patterns, where another way to define relationship is it's a negotiated container where interactions can take place. So container, meaning there are boundaries to what this connection is and what types of exchanges we plan to make within this container, and all the other kinds of interactions that are not that will live outside of this relationship. It won't be included because this relationship is only this bound. And negotiated because like I do think that that's very Libran as far as equality and both people being represented inside the reflection then of like what is the relationship. Like I have in my mind like this idea of divine union, where a divine union is two individual beings who are each in their own wholeness. And the divine union itself is a container of relationship that holds the wholeness of each of the individuals that are stepping into it. So nothing is off limits. Nothing is outside of the relationship. The whole individual is here. The whole individual is here. And just so that nobody gets it twisted as far as what I mean, I am not talking about monogamy. I'm not talking about like the whole of each individual lives inside this relationship. I'm saying like everything this individual desires is allowed inside the relationship, and everything this individual desires is allowed inside the relationship, meaning basically like it's the opposite of monogamy, meaning like there is no such thing as cheating. Like if the individual desires it, then having it is part of like the divine union. The version that I have in my head is two individuals in their wholeness, two individuals fully in their power. And at that point, neither individual is trying to control the actions of the other person. Neither individual is basing their love on the actions of the other person, right? To say, I love you until you do this or this or this, like that is the definition of conditional love. And at that point, you got to ask yourself, is that even love? I've contemplated it. I say no. I say it's really not. That's not love. Love expands. Love does not contract. Love gets bigger and bigger and bigger. Love makes you bigger. So if someone is loving you and it's making you smaller, that's not love, that's control. So control with a little manipulation on the side. So like, again, this is all just for the purpose of your individual contemplation. Like nobody says anybody has to believe any of this, but I can tell you that it feels freeing to me to think about like I've always been anti-commitment, like just the idea of promising like till death do us part or like for the rest of my life. Like how do I know that? Like how could I possibly know that the me in 20 years is going to agree with this decision from 20 years ago? Like I learn and I evolve every single day. Like I'm not going to make a promise that future me has to pay the price for. Like but again, that's just me. But this idea of divine union transcends anything even remotely in the physical world currently, as far as like marriage is concerned. Again, marriage is such a limiting idea compared to this divine union concept, where the only vow is, I will cherish your wholeness. I will nurture you in your wholeness, toward your wholeness, into greater wholeness, into deeper wholeness. Like, and at that point, nothing is off limits. If you desire it, you should chase it. If you feel it passionately, you should fight for it, period. And what I think about it is irrelevant to your wholeness. So that is the level of like freedom and respect that I would want from my partner. And it's like, yeah, like if my wholeness was allowed to be there, oh, dude, I could totally say till death do us part, because like anything I desire, I just go have it. Anything, any direction where life is trying to pull me in this direction, I can have that. Like I can trust myself. I can be in my own power. And if that is the type of partnership, if that's the container, if like it's just gigantic, it's the size of the whole world, and it encompasses anything my wholeness could ever want and theirs. At that point, I'm like, wow, okay, I'm really seeing some viability in divine union. Again, this is not marriage. This is not monogamy. This is like reinventing relationship. Which is very sun south node. Like that's really interesting as far as like becoming aware of all of the patterns that don't work according to you, right? For you. These aren't universal truths. These are individual truths of like, yeah, I've been in relationships like that and I don't like that pattern. I don't like that container. I don't like that shape of that container because it limits me in this way or it causes this or whatever it is. Okay, if you don't like it, then make up new rules. Like brand new relationship paradigm that like maybe nobody's even ever lived it before, but you want to. So you set that as your intention of like, this is how I personally define divine union. And this is the kind of relationship that I am looking for. And at that point, having a clear intention makes life so much simpler. For example, everything that you meet that's not that, easy peasy. It's not that. It's not what I want. And then no. Like our intention is like our sorting mechanism of like, again, one of the Libra shadows is indecisiveness. And I think when you have really clear intentions as far as what you personally want, indecisiveness isn't really a thing. It's like there's really not even a decision to be made because either it does match what I want, aka my authentic self, or it does not. And that's not a decision. That's just being authentic. It's just being honest about who you are and what you desire. So the way we engage in relationships is really what is at the heart of the matter this Libra season, and rethinking what it is that we have committed to and how much and how much of those are containers you want to continue to be in. And again, that's a very genuine question, and nobody else can tell you which relationships to be in and which relationships to not be in. Like, I think we've all had the experience, or maybe close to all, have had the experience of a friend or somebody that we can see in our lives who is in what we would call, like looking in from the outside, we would call it a toxic relationship. And we would be so certain and convicted that like they shouldn't be there. They're so much better than this, yada, yada, yada. Like from the outside, we want really badly to advocate for them to like, get the hell out of this toxic relationship. But I don't know. And this isn't even really a belief. This is really truly a contemplation that I am still very much in the middle of, but I don't even know if a dysfunctional pairing exists. And what I mean by that is I think, if a dysfunctional pair didn't exist, that means every pair is functional. Every pair has a function. Every relationship, like the toxic relationship that's so easy to spot from the outside, on the inside, one person's getting something from the other that they really value. And the other person who's still in that relationship with them is getting something from them that they really value. So it's really, really disrespectful from the outside to call anybody's relationship dysfunctional, because that's like saying that your needs are dysfunctional. And it's like, I think we call things dysfunctional that we don't personally understand. We don't understand why someone would stay in a relationship like that and be treated like that. But from the inside, there's a need that's being fed. And that's why, like, it's so personal. It's so important not to let other people get in your head about your relationships, because really our relationships are one of the most personal creations that we will get to make here on this planet. The people we choose to be in relationship with and the people we choose to not be in relationship with. Like, again, that is like one of the greatest masterpieces of our authenticity that we will get to create while we are alive, are our relationships. So it goes back again to, like, why are you in the relationship? And just because other people can't understand it, just because other people look at it and go like, dude, like, he's no good for you. Like, this is, now I'm talking about my experience. Like, I had a relationship, probably like one of the most intense as far as my feelings for this person. And it was the most intense as far as, like, basically all the people that I had been friends with, as I get into that relationship, they all just, like, had huge red flags. They were like, no, absolutely not. Like, he cannot be trusted. Like, he's manipulative, blah, 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 blah. And the whole time I just, like, I'm really, really, really honestly glad that I had that experience, because it lets me see just how true it is that, like, when you're on the inside of it, it's feeding something that, I mean, the only thing that my friends telling me that, like, the only thing that it did was have me spend less time with them. Like, I think the heart wants what the heart wants, like that whole saying. Like, sometimes, scratch that, often, right? Like, relationships are a mirror. Often, our relationship will reveal our needs to us. Like, we will almost unconsciously get into relationship with people who feed needs that we may not have even known that we had, you know? And that was very much the case with him, is like, I didn't even think feeling the way he made me feel, I didn't even think that was possible. So, like, it felt so good. It blew my mind to, like, even just talk to him. And then my friends are over here telling me, like, he's bad. And I'm like, I think you're bad. Get away from me. Like, it just was so not even a competition. And so, yeah, I think it's, like, really interesting to think about why we get into relationships in the first place and why we stay there once we are there. And this is where relationships and shadow work kind of go hand in hand, where, like, again, the relationship, the partner, the friend, whatever it is, the, business partner, coworker, whatever it is, like, they have the potential to reveal things to you about yourself that you didn't even know. And I don't mean that they're, like, brainwashing you or anything like that. Like, that's clearly its own thing of, like, manipulation and mind control. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about glimmers. I'm talking about, like, glimmers and triggers. Like, their presence in your reality, reflecting to you, they will move energy inside of you, and you will get to see yourself more clearly. And as they trigger the glimmers, right, which is basically all a brand new romantic relationship is, it's like all of these little glimmers of this feels so good. It's, again, really important to have a relationship with relationship itself, to understand, like, what does it mean when somebody else is reflecting to me? Does it mean that, like, they are the source of love in my world? Because I've been there. That's, like, basically the definition of codependency, is like, they are my source of love. They are my source of safety. When I am not with them, I am not okay. And I have been in multiple relationships that smelled just like that. And that basically what's going on in that picture is, like, I am giving them the credit for everything good. And I'm basically beating the hell out of myself for everything bad. And that's not fair. That's not fair at all. And that's funny, like a Libra thing. as far as fairness goes. But like, if you're gonna give them credit for the good, give them credit for the bad too. If you're gonna take credit for the bad, take credit for the good too. You know, like, go all in either way. And I think either way, you're in a healthier spot than like where I was, giving them all the credit for how awesome they were and taking all the blame as far as like everything dysfunctional was my fault. So yeah, I think either own both the glimmers and the triggers, or remember that it's all them. So like, even when they trigger you, if they trigger something inside of you, that's on them too. And that's not generally how I was acting back in the day. But yeah, now I would say my relationship to relationship is that the person across from me is my mirror. And anything that they are causing me to feel inside of myself is them calling forward greater and greater levels of self through me, thanks to their reflection. So the glimmers, the happiness that they cause me to feel, the love that they cause me to feel, the sexual attraction that they cause me to feel, like taking ownership of all of that. That's all me. That's me. That's me feeling those things. And that, yes, has something to do with them because it's through their reflection that I gained access. But once you have access, you have access. So again, it doesn't belong to them. It's not because of it. Maybe a little bit because of them, but it's not theirs. It's ours. And same with the trigger, right? Like, yes, they said something that, whatever. Like, I think about one of the early triggers between me and Dolly. She said something that she meant to be helpful, and it knocked the wind out of me. It hurt so bad. And she didn't mean it at all. Right? Like, she didn't mean it. I should say she meant it how she meant it, which was to be helpful and supportive. But how she said it and how I took it was very, very triggering for me. But it's like her doubting me, which was kind of what it came across as, like her doubting me, that was absolutely reflecting a whole iceberg of self-doubt that I had inside of myself. And so actually her doing that and it being so upsetting to me was exactly what I needed to be able to see that, like, I need to believe in myself more, right? Like, it's so easy to be like, you should believe in me, you should support me. Like, they're doing their best. They got their own whole thing going on. I can support me. I can believe in me to the point where if you don't, I'm just like, oh gosh, yeah, totally. Like, just, I already believe in me. So I'm not looking to her for the co-signing, the codependence of like, yeah, she thinks I can do it. So that means I can. And that's what I wanted. I wanted her to be like, oh, you totally got this, like whatever else. And that's not what she said. And it really deflated my balloon. But that's another piece of relationship is expectation. What is it that you're expecting of this other person? And that, again, is something that I think a lot of us are, well, or maybe that, like, I was going to say a lot of us are blind to early on, but like maybe that's just the way it is. Like, we don't know about relationship until we get in it. And then we're like, we really like how they did this, but never again will I date somebody who has that kind of thing going on. And then you go to the next one and like, okay, so they didn't have that, and they didn't have this thing that you really liked, but they did have this other thing that you really liked, but they also had this other bad habit that now, like, yeah, I don't want to deal with that. Like, we don't know about relationship until we live it. And so it's important to have a relationship and with our own expectations of that relationship, because I think often we don't even know that we have certain expectations of them until they've disappointed us. And when they've disappointed us, like, it's impossible to be disappointed if you don't have an expectation in the first place, right? Like, if you're totally cool with whatever happens and then it happens, like, there's no gap. The gap is the disappointment. Like, I expected this, I needed this, and this happened. And the distance between those two things is the strength of disappointment that we feel. And so when we feel disappointed in our partner or mad at them for something that they did or whatever, we really have to ask ourselves, was this an expectation that I already communicated? maybe it was, maybe it's not, right? Like in that instance, I don't think I've ever said to Dolly, like, I need you to keep your doubt to yourself and only ever support. Like yeah, like I've never actually come right out and said that. Same with like, well, I was gonna say, like, same with monogamy. Like, I feel like way too many people just assume that like marriage equals monogamy, but like I think those days should come to a close as far as like any kind of assumptions in our expectations around relationship, because it's just not fair to the other person as far as like, you know, they when it comes to getting to know another person, it is incredibly incremental in nature. Every single one of us has multiple facets, multiple sides of our being. And the way we choose to reveal either this facet, or maybe you get to see a whole side one day, like the way we choose to reveal ourselves, again, is another masterpiece of our authenticity. We are allowed to, we have a right to privacy. I mean, the fact that nobody else can hear our thoughts, like we have intuitive, like picking up on energies and stuff like that, but like no one else can actually hear our thoughts. And that inherent sense of privacy to the inside of yourself, it's like we get to decide what we let out and what we don't. And I think a lot of people might get into situations where they don't ask the right questions up front. Instead, they expect that their partner is like them, or that values things the way that they do, or feels the same about certain elements of life, or whatever it is. And so because they've assumed, and then the partner is being authentic, and then they wake up in that moment like of disillusionment of like, wait, what? And it's like, well, we never said that this was, and like that I think is seen as like such a bullshit, like cop out, whatever. But again, it's like in relationship, it always takes two to tango, and another person is only reflecting to us ourselves. So like every single thing that our partner does and every single thing that our partner makes us feel is ours. It belongs to us. And if we find ourselves caught in a moment where they're doing something that we never communicated that we have this boundary, at that point, like, I mean, I technically, again, everybody gets to decide, like, what do you want to do with that? But like at that point, for me, I take responsibility that this is my expectation and they do not owe me this, right? Like they are not obligated to fulfill my expectations just because I have some. And I am allowed, this is my other piece of my relationship with my expectations, is I'm allowed to communicate them. I'm allowed to say that, not really my expectations, but my boundaries. I'm allowed to say, this is my boundary of what I will and will not accept. And that's not telling them that they have to be different. That's saying that if you're not able to like exist with this boundary in mind, then you need to go away from me, because this boundary will be respected. So I get to say that. I get to have the boundaries that keep me how I want to be kept. And they have every right to walk away. They have every right to choose that this is not what I want, right? Like I don't want to live like that. I don't want to stay inside this line or on the outside of this line. Like I can't deal with that. Have a nice life. Like, I mean, I think there's like a piece of like radical responsibility of taking responsibility for what you want, and to, I think, increase your chances of getting what you want by being really clear in your communication with anybody that you're trying to be in relationship with, that this is what I want, and give them an opportunity to know that and make their own decision on, does that align close enough with what you want or not? And to be okay with them choosing that, no, that's not what they want. And I think the piece that just came is like, that gets really tricky when what you're getting out of the relationship is your sense of security. So like, if I'm in the relationship, I feel secure. And if I'm not in the relationship, then I don't feel secure. And so now I'm in this limbo area of like, I want the security. I want the security that the relationship provides. So I will sacrifice this boundary that they don't like and this boundary that they don't like. I'll take those away because they really like them and I like this security. And you could replace security with love. You could replace security with, I mean, like lots of things as far as like, what are you getting from the relationship that is more valuable than you and your own boundaries and your own authenticity? I mean, there are a lot of people in this world trading authenticity for security. That I still do it myself. Like even just choosing to withhold in certain moments from certain people, we're keeping ourselves safe. There's like a self-preservation instinct in withholding our real self that, like, I think at a certain point, like there's light and shadow in all things, and there's a light side to self-preservation. There's a light side to withholding information that you think is not going to be deemed acceptable. It's a trick of survival. So we're allowed to be our authentic self, and we're allowed to say wholeheartedly upfront that this is what I want in relationship. I want a divine union where if my wholeness wants something, that the world is my oyster, right? Like I don't want to concede to limitations on myself. I'm not going to do that. And if that means that somebody's not comfortable being in relationship with me, then they are welcome to move on with their life and find somebody else who will participate in the kind of relationship that they want. They deserve that, as do I. So the clearer we can be about ourselves based on everything that we've ever learned from being in relationship with other people, I think the better the chances of us getting what we want out of relationships going forward. And if anything, this Aries North Node chapter that we're living in is like all these personal planets are going to transit over the South Node. I think it's incredibly likely that a lot of people could be manifesting their way into their own version of divine union, where, like, that Aries North Node side of like the more authentic you are, the sexier you are to whoever it is that you're supposed to be in this divine union with. Like there's a correlation between becoming more authentic and finding the most perfect partner for you, right? Like the most aligned connection for you personally. Like their weird fits with your weird kind of thing. They are not Prince Charming. They just happen to be well suited for you. Something to that effect, right? It's not a fairy tale. This is real life. There will be light and shadow in all things, but it is the right relationship at the right time for you. And that's another piece of why I circle back around to like, do dysfunctional connections even exist? Or are there only functional connections? Because even the relationships that have been the hardest for me in my life have brought me some of the greatest healing. Like the most medicine comes through those really, really, really challenging relationships and the challenging emotions that come with those relationships. So I I don't know. I lean towards all pairings are functional. That like if you're going to choose to partner up with somebody, there's a reason for it. A good one. A really good one that maybe we don't even fully consciously understand because so much of what we do is guided by our shadow. And that's again where relationships and shadow work go hand in hand. If we're taking radical responsibility for everything that's coming up in us, then shadow work is kind of a must. As far as like, this person is pissing me off, it's like, okay, so leave them alone, go back to yourself, get your journal out, and like, what is it that they're showing to you? Why is this happening for you? Right? It's not happening to you, it's happening for you. So why do you think they're showing you what they're showing you? And sometimes like our partner can be the one to kind of push us over the edge, right? Like push us over the edge. And sometimes the answer is like, what were you doing standing so close to the edge? Why were you on the edge in the first place? Why did you leave yourself in that vulnerable position such that one little comment is crumbling your entire world? Like there are so many different facets to what a partner can help us see about ourselves. but it truly takes like an iron stomach to be able to be in conscious relationship, like taking conscious responsibility of your part of the relationship. Like, it's one of the most painful things I've ever done as far as owning my triggers, walking away from the one who upset me so that I can go sort this out for myself and I can stop attracting people like you over and over and over. Good day, sir. Yeah, like the troublemakers, the ones who really move our energy, like they are giving us something that we are actually ready for, and their reflection is the vehicle through which we're becoming aware of it. So I think, relationship has like kind of a fairy tale romance kind of connotation to it. And again, Libra is an air sign. Air energy is emotionally detached. Like, I think that's where, business partnerships are one of the most interesting manifestations of Libra energy, as far as like that's probably the closest to what relationship truly is, as far as choosing to partner with someone, choosing to negotiate a contract, choosing to enter into an agreement, choosing to file paperwork together. Like you're like negotiating the bounds of what this will be in a very conscious way, because that's business, right? Like, but in marriage, I think a lot of times, like we just kind of breeze past that marriage is this like formidable concept that everybody has the same definition and perception of, and that is just not true. That's not. And then, a lot of the times, like we forego talking about some of the things, like asking the right questions basically, and making sure that, what are our expectations of the relationship, and are those even realistic? So yeah, I think lots of things, obviously, about relationships and Libra energy and Libra season. One thing that I will say that I think is really interesting too is that as we enter Libra season, there are 6 planets retrograde, and I listed them. Let's see, there's Jupiter, Saturn, Uranus, Neptune, Pluto, and Chiron. So those are all retrograde at the beginning of Libra season, and I think, okay, so Pluto stations direct October 10th. And that's it. So like at the end of Libra season, we have 5 planets retrograde. So that's really interesting that the only planet stationing direct during Libra season is Pluto. And Pluto is all about our self-empowerment. Pluto is also squaring the nodes in Aries and Libra. And so Pluto will station direct, squaring the Libra South node. Let's see. Shortly after, like just above that, October 3rd is when Mars conjuncts the South node. And then it's about a week later when Pluto stations direct. So I have a feeling that how those two are going to play out is something along the lines of Mars conjuncting the South node will bring conflict to a head in the relationships where it is already present. For anybody wanting to believe that this is coming out of the blue, trust me, it is not. These will be patterns of misalignment that have been present for a long time, potentially even the entire time of the relationship. And this Mars conjunct South node is simply about becoming more aware. And remember, we are taking radical responsibility, or at least I am taking radical responsibility for what I witness. And so at a certain point, sometimes our only option is to remove ourselves from the situation. Again, the answer is typically not to make the other person be different, but rather for ourselves to choose something different. So that October 3rd, Mars conjunction with the South node, bringing a lot to the surface as far as what you are dealing with compared to what you want to deal with. And if a relationship is giving you all kinds of things that you do not want to deal with, it is your choice on whether or not you stay and continue to participate in that relationship, or you choose to do something different. You make other arrangements for yourself, which I think is really interesting, since most of Libra season is happening under the Virgo new moon lunar cycle. So like for most of Libra season, we're under this Virgo new moon where we're changing our routines, we're updating what we do on a daily basis, we're getting more serious about our health and our well-being, which is not necessarily like health, like just your body. It's more about like the vitality to keep going, the vitality to have a sustainable path to where you can do this and have some longevity because life is important to you. That's cool. But as we have this conflict arise, and as we're already kind of rethinking our routines and our health, and then we have Pluto station direct on October 10th, I see that being a time where all of a sudden we realize kind of like okay, the image I just got is like you're drowning in 2 feet of water kind of thing. And like Pluto stationing direct is like you just kind of stand up and you're like, oh, and you just like walk off. Like, this is not dramatic. This is not hard. This is not complicated. Use your legs, stand up, walk away. Like, you can't do that. And so I think there may be around October 10th a lot of people taking their power back from a lot of relationships that have been pretty ugly looking from the outside for a long time. But like we've already established, they were doing something for them for a while. And then we get to the point where we are no longer willing to put up with this. And I think that is a beautiful point to be at, because you think about this sounds really gross and disgusting, but I was like admiring scabs the other day, like the whole idea of a scab where you like cut yourself or you knock a piece of skin off I have like a spot on my thumb where I was like unpacking freight the other day and I jammed my hand in the box and it like scraped a big chunk of skin off my thumb and a scab formed. And I was like, that's so cool that like automatically this protective barrier will form where there's a wound, and then the protective barrier will form. And underneath the protective barrier, the wound is healing the whole time, right? Like the blood is bringing whatever it needs to the surface of the skin, and new skin is growing and yada, yada, yada. And eventually the scab falls off because underneath it reveals like perfectly healed, brand new skin, like fully healed. And so I think some relationships work like that, where there's a wound, and the relationship comes and it acts as a scab to protect the wound. And eventually the wound is healed and the scab falls off. And again, I totally get how disgusting scabs are. Like, I'm sorry to have to use that word so many times. It has such a gross connotation, but I think that's what's happening. Like, I think that's why sometimes we wake up and we're drowning in 2 feet of water, because there was a wound and now it's healed. And now you can stand up and you can walk away because you no longer have that wound. And how did it heal? Because this relationship gave you the cover that you needed to feel okay enough to heal the wounds that were underneath, whether you knew that that's what was going on or not. I think that's like, again, like we don't try to grow scabs, just like we don't try to find our way into sometimes dysfunctional from the outside looking relationships. Like we don't try to find those, but we gravitate towards them based on the wounds that we have yet to heal. So I think, again, relationships serve a purpose, but at a certain point, there will be times where we've healed the wounds that drew us to that person in the first place. And now, if the relationship was based on, these are your wounds and these are my wounds, and like these wounds go together and then you heal your wounds, like what is the basis of this relationship? There isn't one. And so that's where the scab falls off. The relationship, it's not needed anymore. You don't need protective cover because the wound is healed now. So I think that Pluto stationing direct is like all that to say. Pluto stationing direct, I think a lot of scabs are going to fall off. I think a lot of people are going to recognize that I have a lot more power than I've been consciously realizing and granting to myself. And that's neither here nor there. That's no reason to beat up on ourselves. But you don't have to keep flopping around in 2 feet of water. You can get up and walk away at any time. That's your choice. So the rest of what I want to do here is just kind of go through the transits that I haven't touched on yet and offer a few channeled thoughts. So I think the next one that I haven't touched on, which is actually the first transit of Libra season, which starts September 23rd, September 29th, early morning Central Time is what time it's happening for me. So definitely adjust for your location on the planet. But early September 29th is the full moon in Aries at 6 degrees. And we had, if you'll remember, we had an Aries new moon sandwich back in the spring of 2023. That was also when the lunar cycle switched, if you remember. Like, we were in a year and a half where every time the sun changed signs, like when it would enter Libra, it would be the new moon in Libra and then the full moon in Aries. And it just kind of like went like that, like super organized. And then we had, like, first thing when the sun got into Aries, we had an Aries new moon. And then 2 weeks later, we had the Libra full moon. And then in like the 29th degree, like right before, minutes before the moon was going to move into Taurus, we have a second Aries new moon. So that happened back in the spring. Okay, we got a double dose of an Aries new moon. And now this is the Aries full moon. So think back to, let's see, Aries season would be like March 20th, 21st, thereabouts, through April 20th or 21st, thereabouts. So I remember that was a very powerful time, very powerful. And actually, I do believe that second Aries new moon was a solar eclipse. The 29-degree Aries new moon was also a new moon solar eclipse. So yeah, the one that happened, that would have been like April 20th, thereabouts. What was going on for you at that time? How did the two new moons work together? Because at the beginning of Aries season, we have the first one. At the end of Aries season, we have the second one. New moons are typically about new seeds getting planted. And then 6 months later, we have the full moon in that sign. So the full moon in Aries. And that is meant to represent the harvest, the manifestation, you planted the seeds and this is what grew out of those seeds. So this is the Aries full moon that grew out of that double dose of Aries new moon earlier this year. And again, I think, we look at the lineup here as far as like almost right off the bat, September 29th, we have the Aries full moon. A few days later is the Mars conjunct South Node, and then a week later is Pluto stationing direct. So like that's the first half of Libra season is going to be a bit intense, I think. And in terms of those three transits, the full moon in Aries, I see showing us a new side to our strength that we did not yet know that we possessed. And then the Mars conjunct South Node bringing us a level of conflict that potentially we've never even faced before. But then the Pluto stationing direct being able to, and kind of like, pulling in the Aries full moon, like the new level of strength, like, yes, we're facing conflict we've never faced before, but also even that is like pulling even more of our strength forward for us to be able to see. And then Pluto stations direct, and I see kind of like a decision at that point, like a moving forward based on what did you see during the Aries full moon? Probably more like a more attractive version of yourself that you yourself are getting to see. More confident, more powerful, more strong, more valuable. Like you get to see that. And then when this challenge comes, when the Mars South Node conjunction happens, it's like that's where your head's at, is like coming off of this experience, like I'm a badass. And then here's this opponent like right in your freaking face. And you're like, listen up, buddy. I don't know. But like something like that, where like you have extra confidence as you go into this conflict. And then in the aftermath of the conflict, let me tell you this, like when we're in conflict with each other, again, this is one of the masterpieces of authenticity that we're here to paint in our lives. Like how we are during conflict is a representation of our authentic self. How we behave when we are provoked is a reflection of our authentic self. You know, like it's really weird. I've heard multiple stories lately and then was thinking about it again this morning related to this, is like, you know, we can't control what anybody else does. We are only in control of our own being. We are sovereign unto ourselves. And that means also kind of peppering in this idea of radical responsibility. That means that we cannot control who provokes us or loves us or whatever. Like that is not within our control. But what is within our control is how we respond, how we react or how we respond. Like are we going to be reactive? Are we going to just fly off the handle? Or again, are we going to use that as an opportunity to deepen our relationship to relationship? What does it mean when someone reflects something to you? What does that mean? Because I am telling you that in a conflict, the way someone chooses to fight is a reflection of them. So if someone is being hateful and nasty and calling names and issuing low blows and pressing psychological buttons because they know you so well, they know exactly how to hurt you, that is a reflection of the character of the person you are dealing with. How you feel about what they're saying, that's you. That's the part that, like, if you're triggered, like if you're losing it, like, you know, that part of it, like, why is it so upsetting? Like, that's for you to work on in your shadow work. But like, just because someone's mean and hateful to you doesn't mean you have to be upset about it. Because again, if you have a relationship to relationship that says like, other people will show me their true colors and my experience of them, that's the part that belongs to me. So when someone is fighting dirty with me, again, I see that kind of happening through this Mars South Node conjunction, like just like passive aggressiveness. And you see, like, I don't like it. I don't like it one bit. But that's basically how I used to fight, which is probably why it bothers me so much. Yeah, like I'm at a place in my life where, just be honest with me. Let's just talk about it. Let's just like say what it is and let's make it right, you know? But to just like be mean to someone, like that meanness also lacks the radical responsibility that I value so highly as well. But all of that to say, I think when Pluto stations direct, there will be a lot of people realizing that, why am I putting up with this still? And I think I've healed whatever it was that had me being here in the first place. So I think it's time for me to use my power to change my circumstance, to get myself out of this relationship, to change my living situation if it goes that far, change my work situation if that's what it is, like to, you know, you ride that Virgo new moon cycle of like changing your lifestyle, changing your routines. Like, you can build whatever kind of life you want. None of us have to put up with anything. And I see a lot less people putting up with shit come about October 10th. So that ought to be really cool to see. That's also an interesting piece about Pluto, because it will station direct at 2754 of Capricorn. 2733, I think, is where the US Pluto return point is. So the 27th degree is where the US Pluto return and where Pluto's stationing direct, even though it's not making it all the way back to 2733. But that's the last time that Pluto is going to touch 27 degrees for another 249 years or whatever it takes Pluto to go around. So we only have another few months of Pluto in Capricorn before January 2024, when Pluto will make its entrance into Aquarius, and it'll be there for 20 years before it moves on to Pisces. So that shift is on its way out. And at the same time, I think these last 3 months could potentially be some of the most tumultuous of the entire Pluto and Capricorn transit, because I see like this Pluto gets such a bad rap. Like I know it's like Hades and underworld and like scary and like all that, but at the same time, like Pluto is one of our most loyal allies, because Pluto will not tolerate anything that keeps you out of your power. Period. And Pluto doesn't care what you think about the destruction it causes if it knows that getting rid of this thing is going to get you more in your power. It's willing to let you be devastated if it means getting you to your power. So it's like the definition of tough love, and Capricorn is also kind of a tough love kind of space. So yeah, like I could definitely see some like last ditch efforts of Pluto trying to crumble the structures in our lives that are not serving us, right? Like Pluto can't touch anything that is in our highest good, that is in alignment with our most empowered self. Like if there's a structure in our life that's feeding us and growing us into bigger and bigger and bigger versions of ourselves, like Pluto can't touch that. That's the whole point, is the Pluto wants you in your power. So Pluto leaves alone anything that's letting you be in your power. It's like protected by Pluto. It's untouchable because it's letting you be in your power. And on the flip side, if it's not letting you be in their power, there's nothing you can do to stop the destruction of Pluto taking it away. So anything that may come to a close in like the rest of this year, 2023, and kind of into that home stretch in January of 2024, anything that falls apart, like just keep that in the back of your mind, as far as like only things that are keeping you disempowered can be taken away in the first place. So if something is crumbling, the question I would ask is, how is this getting me more into my power? Like, how was that holding me out of my power, right? And get curious about, why is this happening for me? The next thing that we have in, let's see, after Pluto stationing direct, then we have the sun opposite Chiron. Yes. I was just looking, I skipped over Lilith entering Virgo, but I am going to keep skipping that because I'm not a Lilith expert by any means. But it does change signs, and it only does that about once every 9 months. So I thought I'd throw it in there. So the next thing we have is sun opposite Chiron, October 11th. So here's where, oh God. Yeah. So like if we're following along in the list of transits, like we had the full moon in Aries. Yay, I'm a badass. Then we had Mars conjunct the South Node. You manifest somebody to fight, and you get to see your badass in action. And it doesn't have to be a physical fight. Word fighting is just as much of a trauma as physical fighting, in my opinion. But anyways, so you manifest your opponent, Mars conjunct South Node. You get to see your badass in action. Possibly you take some hits. Okay. Like, I love this saying. The first rule of a knife fight is that you're going to get cut. Okay. So if you want to go head to head with somebody, if you want to fight it out with them, you're going to come out of it a little bit beat up. And that's where maybe we heal our wounds. We lick our wounds a little bit. And then we decide, with that Pluto stationing direct, like, what is in my power to do to change this situation for in the better, like to bring things more into alignment with in favor to me. And the next day after Pluto stations direct, then we have the sun opposing Chiron at 17 degrees of Aries. Chiron retrograde is at 17 degrees of Aries. The sun will be at 17 degrees of Libra. So that's on October 11th. And that feels like it could go two very different ways based on how that the day before goes and how really that whole week before goes. Because here's the thing. If you, let's say the Aries full moon wasn't so much I'm a badass. What if the answer was I'm a loser? Okay. And then Mars conjunct South Node. This is a very different picture. This is like, I can't imagine there's very, very many people that are going to manifest this version watching this channel. This is a very unconscious kind of manifestation, but I want to paint the picture for contrast for when we get to this point of Sun opposite Chiron. So like the shadow version of this, the unconscious version of this is Aries full moon is I'm a loser. What am I doing with my life? Like, why am I not farther along? Like, look at how good everybody else is. Look at how shitty I am. Like, just the version that you see of yourself is not great. And then because it's not great, because you're already kind of like down on yourself, Mars conjuncts the South Node, and you manifest somebody who's also pretty down on you, and you take it really seriously. You take it really personally that this person thinks so poorly of you, that they don't like you. They are very specific about why they don't like you, yada, yada, yada. And then we have Pluto stationing direct. And instead of like getting your power back and choosing to change it, it's a wave of powerlessness that will overwhelm you with grief and feelings of trappedness, like you're stuck in this situation and you have no capacity to change it. And at that point, the next day, the sun will oppose Chiron. And in that version, I think that could be one of the most painful days of the year as far as getting to see into why you dislike yourself so strongly. What is it? What is it about you that you think is not good enough? What is it about you that's so reprehensible, that's so worth abandoning, like that's so worthy of being told what a piece of shit you are? Like, why do you think that? Because nobody else, like people can treat you that way, but it only bothers you if you believe it. If you don't believe it, somebody hating you is like, oh, look, they're having a bad day. You know, like, oh, I hope they feel better. You don't take it personally. Like in that whole first story, like we don't take it personally. We see them as showing their true colors, and the way we feel is us, but the actions that they're doing, that's not us, that's them. But in this version where you're taking it personally and you already are not a fan of yourself, I think Sun opposite Chiron is going to light up your wounds that aren't healed yet and will show a side to yourself that most likely you don't like seeing. And that's part of like why the beginning of Libra season is so hard for you. If that's something that resonates, is like, you know, if we don't like ourselves, others are a mirror. So if we don't like ourselves, then others will show up who don't like us, who don't like us, who don't like us, who don't like us, who comment and pinpoint and magnify the things about ourselves that we don't like. You know, if I'm already beating up on myself because I have a harsh tone of voice or I'm bossy and mean or whatever, and then my supervisor sits me down and is like, so your tone of voice on the phone is way too harsh and like it's off-putting to customers and whatever else, like I go home and cry about that for 2 days because gosh dang it, like I take it seriously. And it's not because that's what they said, it's because that's what I already thought about myself, whether I was consciously thinking it all the time or not. It's a belief that I hold, that that person is reflecting to me. So I think potentially this first half of Libra season, it could go either way. Either it's going to greatly exaggerate the disempowerment that we're feeling through other people reflecting to us repeatedly the disempowerment that we're holding ourselves in, or on the flip side, if it's like we were talking about before, and then we get to October 11th with the sun opposite Chiron, Chiron's the wounded healer, not just wounded, right? Wounded healer, right? The pain that our Chiron represents in our energy, it's like that is a wound that never really heals. That's like the mythology of Chiron, is that he was hit by a poisoned arrow of the gods, or a poisoned arrow, and because he himself was immortal, the wound never healed. It was supposed to kill him, but he can't be killed. So he's just got a festering wound for the rest of his life. And that's what each of us have in our Chiron placement. It sounds, again, a lot like scabs. Not very pretty to think about, but that pain that you have over and over and over again, it's like psychologically, we have two choices. We can either drown in it, or we can figure out how to make medicine that will maybe not heal the wound, but soothe the pain of the wound, soothe the inflammation of the wound. Like, we know how to make it feel better. And then there are still moments all the time for the rest of our lives where the wound and the pain will flare up, and we get our medicine and we put it on there again. And so I think the really light side of Sun opposite Chiron, the highest frequency that we can hope for, is to see, what are those elements of medicine that you yourself have really practiced and really built up inside of yourself to, for example, like having a relationship with relationship. This is how I've healed my sense of self, is that I stopped taking it personally what other people thought of me. Because my relationship with relationship is that other people are a mirror. So what they're doing is them. What they're causing me to feel is me. And that's my relationship to relationship. And so at that point, like, that understanding is an example of the medicine that has helped me to heal myself and to allow my divine authenticity to, take up more and more space in my life. So I think hopefully there are a lot of people who could become, or like manifest, a deeper level of self-awareness of the healing gifts that they possess based on the pain that they've been through, no doubt, but the way that they responded to that pain, the way that they soothed themselves through that pain. I think that path is totally open. And then towards the end of Libra season, we have the new moon solar eclipse. So this is our first eclipse of eclipse season. The Scorpio full moon is also a lunar eclipse. That'll be the next one. That goes, so we'll have the new moon in Libra, and then the Scorpio full moon, and then the Taurus new moon. That's not right. Scratch all of that back like 30 seconds. So we'll have the Libra new moon, which will have the Taurus full moon lunar eclipse. Now we're on it, as its full moon. And then the next new moon will be the Scorpio new moon. Okay. Thank you for letting me correct that. So a solar eclipse new moon is not necessarily different than a new moon. It's just supercharged. It's just a really, really, really intense new moon where the seeds that get planted and the new beginnings that are being initiated through that new moon energy, when it's an eclipse point, that means that it's bringing you something that is not just unfolding over the next 6 months, like until the Libra full moon. It's more like chapters of your life, or even volumes in your life that go on for the rest of your days, like manifesting a relationship with a spouse, or starting a business that you run for 40 years, or something like that, where the new beginning is something that is long and protracted and extended. And when it's bringing into your life is a lot. And so the eclipses are always within, I think it was like 14 or 17 degrees of the nodes. And so that's why, even though the nodes are in Aries and Libra, there's still the Taurus full moon lunar eclipse, because that Taurus full moon is closer to the nodes than the Aries full moon, which is only at 6 degrees. So hopefully that made sense. Shortly after the solar eclipse new moon, that's when we'll have the sun conjuncting the south node, also at 24 degrees Libra. The south node is pretty much sitting at 24 degrees Libra, like the whole Libra season. It's spending, I think, about 2 months on 24 degrees. I'll link a video that I have, or I'll link a video in the description that I have, where I talked through the long and short degrees of the Aries North Node, Libra South Node. So if you want to check that out, it goes over the Sabian symbol of 24 degrees Aries. And I'm also going to do a Libra version here pretty soon as well. So the sun, let's see, sun conjuncting the south node October 18th. And the next day is Mercury conjuncting the south node October 19th. And both of those are, again, in follow-up to everything else that we've had go on in this context of relationship. So by the time we have the sun conjuncting the south node and then Mercury conjuncting the south node, it's like Mercury being kind of the last one of these during Libra season, at least, like I said, Venus is still coming along as a personal planet that'll have to go through this here in a little while. But Mercury is the last one. Mercury representing our thoughts, our intellect. It's like the last piece of the puzzle to get on board with like what needs to happen. What, like, any final changes, any final like thoughts or decisions or ideas about, you know, what kind of relationship do I want to have with relationship? What relationships do I want to stay in? What relationships have I grown out of, or I've healed my way out of, or whatever it is? That Mercury kind of coming through as the caboose, if you will. It seems like there's going to be some understanding that's able to form at that point. Like if there's any lingering anything about what should I do, like I don't know what to do, I'm on the fence or whatever, that classic Libra indecisiveness. I think Mercury crossing the South Node is going to clarify anything that still needs clarified at that point, which is going to be a blessing, I think, by then. And then we get to the end of Libra season when the sun enters Scorpio on October 23rd. So that is a very high level, quick run through of the transits. And I will be back. Let me look at my calendar. Back for the next live stream to talk about Scorpio season. And that will be on October 20th. So if you would like to join me on October 20th for the Scorpio season live stream, I would love to have you there. Until next time, I do hope that you will take such good care of yourselves. I truly hope that this Libra season is going to bring you lovely